Commander Elias Vance stood tall, his eyes scanning the grand hall. The walls were adorned with shimmering metals, and the ceiling glowed with soft lights, casting an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Around him, representatives from different species of the Galactic Confederation gathered, all wearing their ceremonial attire. The air hummed with excitement as the spoils division ceremony was about to begin. Humanity had fought hard during the last interstellar conflict. The war had been long, dangerous, and full of sacrifices, but now it was over. The Confederation, a union of countless alien species, was honoring its victors. And today, Earth had earned its reward. Elias, like most of the human delegation, had expected a practical reward: resources, technology, or new alliances. But he never imagined this. The Zirian elders, the oldest and wisest of the Confederation species, stepped forward, their glowing eyes fixed on Elias. They were known for their ancient customs and their deep respect for strength. But Elias couldn't shake the feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. Commander Elias Vance of Earth, the eldest of the elders, a Zirian named Ralith, spoke in a voice that seemed to echo in the room. "We present you with a gift for your people's bravery." Elias straightened, trying to hide his surprise. He had seen many gifts exchanged between species in this hall, but none like this. The Zirians were known for offering powerful allies or rare knowledge. But this felt different. A hush fell over the crowd as Ralith waved his hand. From behind the elders, a figure stepped forward. At first, Elias thought it was a hologram, something projected to make a statement. But then she moved. She was tall, elegant, and exuded a kind of strength that Elias hadn't expected. Her skin shimmered with a soft, silver hue, and her long, flowing hair seemed to shift colors with every step she took. Her eyes, though alien, had a certain warmth to them, like the calm before a storm. She was beautiful in a way that was almost otherworldly. "Arivia," Ralith continued, "a Zirian of noble birth, chosen as a gift to you." The silence that followed felt heavy. Elias stood frozen, unable to fully process what was happening. A gift from the Zirians. He couldn't believe it. The custom of gifting individuals was rare and ancient. It was reserved for the most significant alliances, or when a species wanted to honor another in a way that words alone couldn't express. To accept such a gift would be an immense responsibility. Arivia's eyes met Elias's, and for a moment, the room seemed to blur. Elias felt a strange sensation, almost as if her gaze was reaching deep into him, pulling him towards something greater than he could understand. But then, reality snapped back. This was no time for confusion. "Excuse me," Elias said, his voice steady but uncertain. I appreciate the gesture, but I cannot accept her as a gift. She's not a possession. She's a person, like anyone else." The crowd murmured. Some seemed shocked, others curious, but Elias didn't care. He had been trained to handle diplomatic situations, but this felt different. Arivia was not a simple token of war. Relith's expression remained unreadable, his glowing eyes studying Elias closely. "The Zirians are known for our bonds with those we choose," he said slowly, his voice calm but heavy with ancient wisdom. "Arivia is more than a mere person. She has the ability to connect with you, to form a deep bond that will aid not just her people, but yours as well." Elias turned to look at Arivia. She stood there quietly, her hands at her sides, waiting for his response. It wasn't her fault that she had been presented as a gift. She was just as much a victim of her people's customs as anyone else. Elias didn't know what to say. The thought of having a bond with someone he didn't know, someone from a completely different species, was overwhelming. But there was something in her eyes that made him hesitate. "I understand," Elias finally said, his voice softer. "But I must be clear. I can't accept her as a gift. She is free to make her own choices." The room fell silent once again. It felt like time stood still. But then, to his surprise, Arivia nodded. She didn't speak, but there was something in the way she looked at him. something that made him feel a strange sense of comfort. Relith seemed to consider this for a moment. Finally, he spoke again. "Very well, Commander Vance. The gift is yours, but under your terms. Arivia will remain with you, but she will not be forced into anything. She is free to make her own decisions." Elias breathed a sigh of relief. This wasn't what he had expected, but it was a start, a small step toward understanding. As the ceremony continued, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet understand. He had been given a chance, not just to lead, but to connect with someone from a completely different world. And somehow, that felt like the greatest reward of all. The days following the spoils division ceremony were filled with questions, tension, and unexpected silence. Commander Elias Vance had made a bold decision, one that many of the galactic representatives found puzzling. He had rejected the traditional concept of the gift that the Xyrians had offered, choosing instead to treat Arivia, the Xyrian girl, as an equal. In the days after the ceremony, Elias spent much of his time thinking about the consequences of his choice. He had been welcomed to the Galactic Confederation with open arms, but his decision to treat Arivia as a person, rather than an object of gratitude, had stirred both admiration and suspicion. Among the various species, the concept of accepting a gift like Arivia was seen as an honor. It was rare and highly valued. The rejection of such an offer, however, was unheard of. The human delegation aboard the ship had divided opinions. Some admired Elias for his stand on equality, while others worried about the diplomatic implications of his actions. However, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that this was the right thing to do. Arivia wasn't a prize to be won. She was a person with her own thoughts, feelings, and past. One morning, as Elias walked down the corridor of the ship, he found himself face to face with Arivia. She had been silently observing the crew from afar, standing apart from the others. Her silver skin shimmered softly under the artificial lights, and her eyes, though alien, seemed to have an unspoken understanding. "Good morning, Arivia," Elias greeted her with a warm smile. She nodded, her lips curling into a soft, cautious smile. "Good morning, Commander Vance." Her voice was melodic, almost like music, but there was a hint of uncertainty in it. "You can just call me Elias," he offered, trying to make her feel more at ease. She looked down for a moment, then raised her eyes to meet his. "I'm still learning about your ways, Elias. I didn't expect this. I thought I would be different." Elias frowned, unsure of how to respond. He had rejected the idea of owning her, but he knew that Arivia was still struggling to understand what her role would be. She had been raised in a world where bonds were formed through loyalty and duty, not freedom. Her entire life had been one of structure and expectations. "You don't have to be anything other than who you are," Elias said gently. "This isn't a place for anyone to be forced into something they don't want." Arivia paused, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "But isn't that what you wanted? A Xyrian gift for your victory?" Elias shook his head. "No, Arivia. I wanted to build alliances based on respect, not ownership. I just want you to know that you're free to make your own choices." She studied him for a long moment, the silence between them growing. Then, with a soft exhale, she spoke again. "I was told you humans are different, that your people don't follow tradition, but make their own paths." Elias smiled. "Sometimes, that's true. We're not perfect, but we try to do the right thing." For the first time since meeting her, Arivia seemed to relax. She gave him a nod, as if accepting his words, though she still appeared unsure. "Thank you, Elias." From that moment on, Elias and Arivia began to spend more time together. He took it slow, trying not to overwhelm her with too much too soon. Their conversations were mostly about the differences in their cultures, their lives before the war, and their dreams for the future. It was a learning process for both of them. As the days went on, it became clear that Arivia was more than just a quiet companion. Her mind was sharp, and she had a deep understanding of the complexities of the galaxy. She was not just a symbol of her people's gratitude. She was a force of intelligence and strength. But despite their growing connection, the tensions aboard the ship were far from resolved. Many of the alien representatives, especially the Xyrians, were not pleased with Elias's actions. They saw his rejection of their customs as a sign of weakness. They didn't understand how a species could act so differently from their own. "Do you think they'll accept you, Elias?" one of the human diplomats asked him one evening. "The Confederation is full of ancient traditions, and you've upset the balance. They might not see us as equals for much longer." Elias glanced out of the window of his quarters, watching as the stars stretched out before him. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure. The only way forward was through understanding. He couldn't accept the idea of treating any species as inferior, not even the ones who were so different from humans. "I don't know what will happen," he replied quietly, "but I can't change who we are, and I won't force Orivia to be something she's not." As the days passed, Elias continued to build a relationship with Orivia, teaching her about humanity and learning from her about the Xyrians. He found himself becoming more and more fascinated by her people's way of life, one that was so different from anything he had known. And as their bond deepened, he began to realize that what they shared was far more valuable than any gift the Confederation could offer. Elias had always believed that true power came from unity, understanding, and respect. But as he spent more time with Orivia, he began to realize that the Xyrian people had a different way of seeing strength. It wasn't just about physical power or the ability to conquer. It was about connection, a bond that transcended all else. Orivia's people, the Xyrians, had a unique gift. They could form deep telepathic connections with others. These bonds weren't just emotional, they were mental and spiritual as well. When a Xyrian chose someone, it wasn't just an alliance. It was a link that tied their very thoughts together, allowing them to share experiences, memories, and feelings. At first, Elias didn't fully understand the importance of this bond. To him, it seemed like a strange, almost overwhelming concept. But over the weeks, he began to notice small things: how Orivia would gaze at him when she thought he wasn't looking, how she seemed to pick up on his moods even when they weren't speaking. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of the ship's observation lounge, watching the stars streak past the window, Orivia spoke up. "Do you ever feel alone?" she asked softly, her eyes distant. Elias looked at her, surprised by the question. "Alone? I mean, sometimes. It's not easy being away from home, from Earth, but I don't think anyone can truly be alone." He paused, thinking for a moment. "Why do you ask?" Orivia hesitated, her silver skin glowing faintly under the soft light. "Because Xyrians, we are never alone. We form bonds with each other. And when we do, we are connected in ways you can't imagine." Elias frowned, trying to understand. "You mean like a friendship or something?" "No," Orivia said, her voice calm but filled with a deep sadness. "Not just friendship. We share everything. Thoughts, memories, feelings. When we form a bond with someone, we know them in a way no one else can. And they know us. It's like becoming one, in a way." Elias stared at her, trying to process what she had said. It sounded both beautiful and terrifying. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to share everything with someone, to have no privacy, no personal space, and yet there was a part of him that felt drawn to the idea. He had always believed that understanding was the key to peace, and perhaps this bond could bring that understanding. "Do you have someone like that?" Elias asked softly. Orivia's eyes lowered. "I did. Once. But that bond was broken. Now, I am alone in a way that no Xyrian should be. I thought that maybe in your people I could find something similar. But..." She trailed off, looking unsure. Elias could feel the weight of her words. She had lost something important, something that had shaped her entire life. He couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility for her, even though he didn't fully understand what that responsibility meant. "I'm sorry," Elias said quietly. I didn't know. Arivia gave him a small, sad smile. It's not your fault. It is my people's way. We form bonds, and when they are broken, it leaves a hole that is hard to fill. Elias sat in silence for a moment, lost in thought. He had never truly considered what it might be like to live in such a connected world, where everything about you could be shared with someone else. It was both a gift and a burden. The depth of connection Arivia spoke of was something he couldn't fully grasp. But it made him think about humanity's own relationships, how sometimes people felt close without ever truly understanding one another. What happened? Elias asked gently. To your bond. Arivia looked out the window, her eyes distant as she recalled the past. I was bonded to someone, a warrior of my people. We shared everything, just as our people do. But then, there was a war. He didn't return. He was lost, and I was left with nothing but the echo of the bond. It's not the same when it's broken. It's painful. Elias could see the pain in her eyes, and it struck him deeply. He had known loss. He had lost comrades during the war, and the pain of that loss never truly went away. But the way Arivia spoke about her bond made him realize just how different their experiences were. You're not alone anymore, Elias said softly, though he wasn't sure how true those words were. The bond that Arivia had lost was something he couldn't replace, but he could offer her his friendship, and he could try to understand her world in a way no one else could. Arivia looked at him, her silver eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. I'm not sure what will happen, Elias, but I feel something. A connection. Maybe not the same as the one I had before, but something. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't know what the future would hold for them, but he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't abandon her. They had started a journey together, and he was determined to see it through, no matter how difficult or strange it might become. As the stars continued to pass by the window, Elias and Arivia sat in silence, both lost in their thoughts. The bond between them was just beginning to form, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But one thing was certain. They were no longer just two strangers from different worlds. They were something more, and that was just the beginning. The days aboard the ship began to pass more quickly. As the mission to secure stronger alliances within the Galactic Confederation continued, Elias and Arivia's bond grew in unexpected ways. Every day brought new challenges, but also new moments of understanding. Elias had never imagined that his relationship with Arivia would evolve so deeply. He had thought of her only as an ally, a gift from the Xerians. But now he found himself learning from her in ways he never expected. The Xerian culture, with its complex relationships and bonds, was unlike anything humans had ever experienced. Elias knew that understanding Arivia would not just be about diplomacy. It would be about sharing their lives in ways that stretched beyond simple interactions. One day, as Elias sat in his quarters reviewing reports, Arivia came to him with a request. It was a small thing, but the seriousness in her eyes caught him off guard. Elias, I need to show you something, she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of urgency. Elias stood and followed her down the corridor, curiosity sparking within him. The ship was quiet, the usual hum of activity muted as most of the crew was engaged in their own tasks. When they reached a secluded part of the ship, Arivia stopped and turned to face him. This place is not part of the ship's regular corridors, Elias observed. Why did you bring me here? Arivia nodded, looking around cautiously before speaking. It's a place where I can show you something, a part of my world, something I haven't shared with anyone. Elias felt a slight unease. He trusted Arivia, but he had learned that the Xerian people held their secrets close. He could sense that whatever she was about to show him was significant. With a deep breath, Arivia extended her hand, and to Elias's surprise, the walls of the corridor began to shift. At first, he thought it was some sort of illusion, but then he realized the ship had some kind of hidden compartment. Slowly, a room emerged from what had appeared to be solid walls. Inside the room, Strange symbols glowed softly on the walls, and the air felt charged, almost alive. The floor was covered with soft, smooth stones that seemed to hum beneath his feet. It wasn't like anything he had seen before. "This is a space where Xerians can connect with the memories of our ancestors," Arivia explained quietly, her voice almost reverent. "It's where we go when we need to remember who we are, when we need guidance. It's not something we share with outsiders." Elias looked around, feeling a mix of awe and wonder. "And you're showing me this?" Arivia nodded slowly. "Yes, I need you to understand something about us, about the Xerian bond. You've told me that you value connection. But this is deeper. This is where our true strength lies." Elias didn't fully understand what she meant, but he listened carefully as Arivia continued. "This space allows us to connect with the past. When we form a bond with another, we not only share our own memories and feelings, but we also tap into the memories of our ancestors. It is said that the first Xerians walked the stars long before any other species, and they left their knowledge behind, in places like this." Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. He had always believed that knowledge was power. But this was something different. To connect with the wisdom of the past, to understand the very origins of a people, it was something he couldn't quite comprehend, but he could feel its importance. "Do you mean that you can access the knowledge of your ancestors, like their experiences?" Elias asked, trying to grasp the concept. "Yes," Arivia replied, "but only through the bond. It is a powerful, sacred process. It isn't just a transfer of knowledge. It's a merging of souls. And when I was bonded with my previous partner, I shared that connection. It was like becoming one." Elias stepped forward, his curiosity growing. "Can I see it? Can I experience it with you?" Arivia hesitated for a moment, her silver eyes searching his face. Finally, she nodded. "Close your eyes, Elias," she instructed. "Let the bond between us grow." Elias did as she asked, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he trusted Arivia. For a moment, the world around him seemed to fade away, and all that remained was the sound of his own heartbeat. Slowly, images began to flash before his eyes. Strange, unfamiliar landscapes, cities rising from dust, ships soaring through distant galaxies. He saw faces, some familiar, others alien. These weren't his memories, but they felt real, like fragments of a forgotten past. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision stopped. Elias opened his eyes and looked at Arivia. Her face was pale, and there was a look of exhaustion in her eyes. "I didn't mean for you to experience all of that," she whispered, her voice heavy. "It is not something meant to be shared so quickly." Elias took a step back, feeling overwhelmed. "That was incredible, but intense. I don't know how you handle it." Arivia closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself. "It's a part of who we are, and it is not always easy to carry." Elias looked at her with a newfound respect. He had only scratched the surface of understanding the Xerians and their ways. But one thing was clear. Their bond was unlike anything he could have imagined. "I don't fully understand yet," Elias said quietly. "But I want to. I want to learn. I want to understand everything about you and your people." Arivia smiled softly, grateful for his words. "And I will teach you, Elias. But it's not just about understanding. It's about feeling, about connecting." Elias nodded, knowing that the path ahead was uncertain. But whatever challenges came their way, he would face them with Arivia by his side. The bond between them had only just begun, and Elias was ready to see where it would lead. The days aboard the ship felt both endless and fleeting. As Elias spent more time with Arivia, he realized that the bond they shared was growing stronger. It was something neither of them had expected, but it was undeniable. The connection between them went beyond mere friendship. It was something deeper, something that seemed to defy the logic of their individual worlds. Despite the growing trust between them, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Arivia's past than she had shared. She had shown him a glimpse of her people's ancient history, and he had experienced the weight of her memories through their bond. But there were still pieces missing, parts of her story that she had yet to reveal. One evening, as they walked through the ship's garden, Elias decided to ask her about it. The gentle hum of the ship was distant, and the soft glow of the artificial plants cast a serene light over them. It felt like the right moment to talk, to truly understand what Arivia had been through. Arivia, Elias began softly, there's something I need to ask. I know you've shared a lot with me, but I feel like there's still something you're not telling me. Something about your past, about what happened before we met. Arivia stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes were shadowed with something that Elias couldn't quite place. Pain, perhaps, or regret. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She simply stood there, as if debating whether or not to share more of herself. I told you about my bond, she said quietly. About the warrior I was once connected to. But there is more than just the loss of that bond. Elias didn't push her. He knew better than to force her to speak, but he waited patiently, allowing her the space to open up when she was ready. Before I became bonded to him, Arivia continued, her voice low, I was part of a very different life. A life that I left behind. I wasn't always the person you see now. I had a family, a home, a future, but it was all taken from me. Elias felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to watch as the world around you changed in ways you couldn't control. But he didn't say anything. He simply listened. I was once the heir to my people, Arivia confessed, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. Before the war, my family ruled. We were strong, united. But when the war began, everything changed. My people were divided. My father, he was a great leader, but even he couldn't hold us together. The war tore us apart, and in the end, it left me alone. Elias was taken aback. He had known that the Xyrians had faced conflict, but he had no idea the depth of it. To be the heir to such a powerful legacy and to lose it all. He couldn't imagine the pain she had endured. I didn't choose this, Arivia said, her voice breaking slightly. I didn't choose to lose everything. But after the war, when I was given to the humans as a gift, it felt like I had nothing left. No purpose, no family. I was a symbol of my people's defeat. Elias took a step closer, his heart heavy with understanding. He had always admired Arivia's strength, her quiet resolve. But now he saw the depth of the burden she carried. You're not just a symbol, Arivia, he said softly. You're a person, a survivor. You're more than what happened to you. Arivia looked at him, her silver eyes searching his face. I want to believe that. But sometimes I feel like I'm still trapped in the past. The weight of it all, it's hard to shake off. Elias reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. I'm here. I'll help you, however I can. For the first time in a long while, Arivia allowed herself to lean into the comfort he offered. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, as if letting go of some of the weight she had been carrying. I don't know what the future holds, she whispered, but maybe it's not about what I've lost. Maybe it's about what I can still find, what we can still build. Elias nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. We'll build it together, no matter what comes next. As they stood in the garden, the quiet hum of the ship filled the space between them. The stars outside the window glimmered, distant but constant, like the promise of a new beginning. Elias knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more unknowns. But he also knew that with Arivia by his side, they could face anything. They had already begun to rebuild something stronger than either of them had imagined. And for the first time, Arivia allowed herself to believe in that possibility. The days aboard the ship felt longer than usual as Elias and Arivia worked side by side, preparing for the upcoming negotiations. The pressure was building, and yet, amidst all the chaos, they found themselves growing closer. The bond between them, once fragile and uncertain, had deepened into something that neither of them had expected. There were no more walls between them, only shared understanding and quiet trust. Elias had always been a soldier at heart, practical, focused, and driven by a sense of duty. But with Arivia, he had started to see things differently. She had a way of seeing the bigger picture, of understanding the complexities of people and their motives. Her insight had proven invaluable, especially as they navigated the delicate dynamics of the upcoming alliance. But as the days passed, Elias began to sense that Arivia was struggling with something, a burden that she had yet to share. He had seen the way she looked out the observation window sometimes, her gaze distant and filled with unspoken thoughts. He knew that the weight of her past was never far from the surface, but now it seemed more pressing. It was as if something was holding her back, and Elias couldn't help but wonder if it was the same thing that had been haunting her for so long. One evening, after a long day of strategizing and preparing, Elias found Arivia sitting alone in the ship's common room. The soft glow of the lights reflected off the polished surfaces, casting a peaceful atmosphere over the space. She was staring out the window, her silver eyes distant, lost in thought. Elias hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. He had always been straightforward, but with Arivia, things were different. He had learned that patience and understanding were just as important as directness. "Arivia," he said gently, his voice breaking the silence. She turned toward him, offering a small but strained smile. "Elias," she said softly, "I didn't hear you come in." He walked over to where she sat, pulling a chair next to her. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his tone filled with concern. "Something on your mind?" Arivia's gaze flickered toward the window once more before she sighed. "There's always something on my mind, Elias. You know that." Her voice was steady, but Elias could hear the weight behind her words. He didn't press her. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, waiting for her to continue. He had learned that she needed time to open up, and he respected that. "I'm just worried," Arivia finally said, her voice softer now. "Worried about what's coming next, about the future." Elias nodded, understanding. The negotiations ahead would be pivotal for the galaxy, and the stakes were higher than ever. But he also knew that it wasn't just the political future that weighed on her. It was her personal journey, her healing process. "I know this isn't easy for you," Elias said, his voice calm. "You've been through so much, and now, all of this, the pressure of it all. It can't be easy." Arivia's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a crack in her composed exterior. There was vulnerability there, hidden beneath the layers she had built to protect herself. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm not strong enough for all of this, that maybe I don't deserve to be here, to be a part of this, of the future we're trying to create." Elias reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're more than strong enough, Arivia. I've seen it in you. Your strength isn't just about being able to fight or lead. It's about how you've carried everything that's happened to you and still managed to keep moving forward." She shook her head, her silver hair falling over her shoulders. "I don't know if I can keep moving forward. I don't know if I can keep doing this." Elias leaned in, his eyes soft but filled with determination. "You're not alone in this. I'm here. We're in this together." For a long moment, Arivia was silent. Then, slowly, she nodded, as if coming to a decision. "I'm scared, Elias. Scared of failing, of not being enough for everyone, especially for my people. For the future I've been given the chance to build." Elias squeezed her shoulder gently, offering her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to be everything for everyone. You just have to be yourself. And that's more than enough." Arivia looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for the truth in his words. Finally, she gave a small nod, the weight in her eyes beginning to lift just a little. "Thank you, Elias. I needed to hear that." Elias smiled back, feeling the warmth spread through him. "Anytime. We've got this, Arivia. Whatever comes next, we face it together." As the silence between them deepened, the hum of the ship's engines seemed to echo their shared understanding. The future ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and difficult decisions. But in that moment, Ilias knew that the real challenge wasn't just about the galaxy. It was about trusting each other, facing their fears, and building something new together. And as Arivia sat beside him, her hand resting in his, Ilias felt the quiet strength of their bond. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew they were ready to face it. Together. The stars outside the ship were bright, more beautiful than ever before. Ilias stood at the observation window, looking out at the vastness of space. It had been months since he and Arivia had started their journey together. The mission to unite the factions of the Galactic Confederation was still ongoing, but things had changed. The mission had become something more, a journey of discovery, not just for the galaxy, but for both of them. Arivia had slowly begun to open up, sharing more of her history, her memories, and the weight of her past. But it wasn't just about the past anymore. As they worked together, Ilias and Arivia had grown closer, not just in purpose, but in spirit. The bond between them had evolved in ways neither of them could have predicted. Ilias had come to understand the Zyrian way of connecting deeply. It wasn't just about knowing someone. It was about truly feeling them, understanding their fears, their hopes, and their dreams. He hadn't fully realized how powerful that connection could be until it started happening between them. But now there was a new challenge on the horizon. The Confederation was on the brink of a breakthrough, a new alliance that could change everything. And Ilias, with Arivia by his side, had a crucial role to play in this delicate moment of diplomacy. The door to the observation room slid open behind him, and he turned to see Arivia standing in the doorway. She looked more confident than he had ever seen her, her silver eyes shining with determination. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, her voice steady, but with a hint of anticipation. Ilias nodded, feeling a surge of energy. "I think so. This could be the moment we've been working toward." Arivia stepped forward, her presence commanding but gentle. She had changed in so many ways, but the most noticeable was the quiet strength that now radiated from her. It was the strength of someone who had come to terms with their past, someone who had learned to move forward. "I believe in you, Ilias," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And I believe in us. Together, we can make this work." Ilias met her gaze, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He had never expected to find someone like her, someone who had taught him so much about not just diplomacy, but about life, about connection, and about healing. He had come to realize that his mission wasn't just about saving the galaxy. It was about finding something deeper, something more meaningful. "Thank you," Ilias replied, his voice sincere. "I couldn't have done this without you. You've shown me what true strength really is." Arivia smiled, a rare and beautiful expression that made Ilias's heart flutter. "We've both taught each other something. You've shown me that it's okay to trust again, that it's okay to believe in something more." As they stood there, side by side, Ilias felt a quiet sense of certainty settle over him. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges they faced, he knew they could face them together. The road ahead would not always be easy, but they had already overcome so much. "I think it's time," Ilias said, turning toward the door. "Let's make this alliance happen." They walked out of the observation room and into the heart of the ship, where the delegation from the Galactic Confederation awaited them. The room was filled with representatives from various species, each one eager to hear what Ilias and Arivia had to say. It was a pivotal moment, a chance to secure peace for the galaxy. As they entered the room, the attention of every delegate turned to them. Ilias and Arivia stood at the front, facing the council of leaders. There was a brief silence, a moment of tension as all eyes rested on them. But Ilias felt calm. Arivia was beside him, and together, they were a team. Arivia took a deep breath, and Elias could feel her confidence. She stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the council. "We stand at a crossroads," she began. "The choices we make today will shape the future of the galaxy. But there is one thing we all share, the desire for peace, for unity. That is the purpose of this alliance, not just to gain power or control, but to work together for the greater good." Her words rang true, and Elias could feel the weight of them. The delegates listened, their expressions softening as they began to understand the sincerity of her words. Arivia had not just spoken as a leader. She had spoken as someone who had lived through the pain of division and understood the importance of unity. Elias stepped forward, adding his voice to hers. "The future of the galaxy doesn't lie in the strength of our individual empires. It lies in our ability to connect, to trust each other. We have seen what happens when we let fear and mistrust rule. It's time to build something better." For the first time, the room was filled with a sense of hope. The delegates exchanged looks, and Elias could see the shift in their eyes. This wasn't just a negotiation. It was the beginning of something new. The council voted unanimously, and just like that, the alliance was formed. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Elias and Arivia, but for the entire galaxy. As they left the council chamber, Elias looked at Arivia, his heart full of pride. "We did it." Arivia smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "We did it together." The journey that had started with uncertainty, with the weight of the past, had led them to this moment. They had formed something stronger than an alliance. They had formed a bond, one that would last beyond the stars themselves. And as the ship sailed toward their next adventure, Elias knew that whatever came next, he and Arivia would face it together. The galaxy had changed, but so had they. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were something greater. They were a team, and they were ready to face the future.